Stand up.
I am going to stay. See, the good part of the problem is that because everybody heard a voice, now they're all coming.
Now they are.
How are you?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First thing after lunch, right? The coveted slot. There we go. And I know it was probably a little bit of a challenge for everybody to find a good place to eat, and the taco place across the street was jammed. But hopefully everybody had a chance to stretch legs and recharge after what I thought was a pretty good morning. So this afternoon we're going to talk about so what. We're going to talk about impact. We have three outstanding panelists this afternoon who are going to give us the fleet perspective, a fleet and fleet marine force perspective, I'll be more specific, about how ISV 2.0 matters to them and what we all should be thinking about in order to, as I mentioned this morning, make sure that folks who have to do the mission have what they need and that it's there when they need it. So we've got sitting up here today Rear Admiral Eric Ruttenberg, who is the Reserve Deputy Commander for U.S. Pacific Fleet. We've got Matt Swartz, the Executive Director for the U.S. Fleet Forces Command. And we have Lieutenant General Cal Worth, Commanding General of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. So a fantastic panel with a whole bunch of experience that they plan to share with us this afternoon. First and foremost, I'll go to each person up here for some opening remarks, and then we'll get into some questions. We're going to try to save about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A from the audience. So as I did this morning, I'm challenging you all, come up with good questions because we don't want silence on the mics. So with that, I will start with, why don't we start with Admiral Ruttenberg.
I was going to defer to the general.
We'll just go.
I'll start with the JO. So Admiral Eric Ruttenberg, I'm the Reserve Deputy Commander out at U.S. Pacific Fleet. Give you a little bit of background and why I think it's one, great for me to be able to be invited here, be able to represent PAC Fleet. One, a citizen sailor as a reservist. I have sat in those seats and been on the developer side and the person trying to figure out what does the government really want or need. And so spent 18 years in industry and doing that side of from the industry side, doing that. Spent the last 7 years back in uniform where I spent a year within the PEO. So moving from, again, the industry side into the PEO, trying to figure out what is the user, what are they asking for? What do they need at the warfighting side? And then had the great opportunity to be the chief engineer at NAVWAR here in San Diego for 3 years. Had a phenomenal workforce, both with the information warfare centers and what we got to do on the acquisition side. Spent 3 years there. And then the last 2.5 years have been at PAC Fleet, now as a consumer. So going from developer to the acquisition side, and now getting to eat my own lunch. Seeing what we have delivered over the last 5 to 7 years and being able to drive that. And certainly we'll make some remarks later on about the needs that we have, that we're still looking for. But now as a fleet consumer, I think it's great to be able to come and have a session here to talk to all of you about what those needs are. So really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
General?
Hey, first and foremost, good afternoon. Thank you for providing me with an opportunity to provide some perspectives on what the Fleet Marine Force specifically might need from industry and is pursuing as part of the naval force. I would go ahead and start. I'm going to work from big to small. What I have the opportunity to do, my task is to lead 2 Marine Expeditionary Force, which is built around what you'll always hear referred to as the Marine Air Ground Task Force, which always consists of a command element. So we're going to talk a little bit about command and control broadly. It consists of a ground combat element, which means those young Marines with sailors who will go ashore and seize and hold key maritime terrain. It consists of the responsibility for the aviation combat element, which means that platforms, exquisite platforms like F-35, and how that platform is interlinked with other capabilities to make it most lethal, most capable at the outer edge of our concentric rings of fires integration, intelligence gathering, and really bringing to bear all of the resources that the United States can bring to bear as we go forward, from crisis into contingency. I'll also talk a little bit about the logistics combat element, which, again, in the future, today's environment and any future environment, logistics will underpin anything we aspire to do in a contested environment, which will be challenged in every way, and requires us to not only be distributed in that environment, but to conduct nodal logistics plugged into big theater logistics, probably, most likely, with an ally or a partner who is the host nation, which therefore can deliver capabilities, capacities that will keep us operationally solvent and ensure that we don't culminate in operations. The Marine Expeditionary Force as a MAGTAF, again, requires, as part of the naval force, that we are partnered with the Navy. We are of the sea. The Commandant, you will hear him speak. When you listen to the Commandant, he will always talk about our naval roots. But our capacities are delivered not only from sea to shore, but sometimes from shore into the maritime realm, meaning that from our positions ashore, from key maritime terrain in littoral areas, maritime spaces, we can hold adversary fleets at risk if we have the proper architectures, if we have the robust, resilient command and control apparatus, if we have the appropriate sensors that can not only sense but make sense of the environment at speed, and then take data that becomes intelligence that is delivered to someone who is not only going to open a kill chain but close a kill chain at speed. Those are the types of challenges that we face right now. Commandant again talks about Marines being forward present and positioned on the sea so that they are available as a resource for combat commanders who face complexity in crisis and competition, and also have the responsibility to scale to full-blown conflict at the high end of the range of military operations. We'll talk a little bit about some of our challenges in that construct. I'll finish by saying that 2 Marine Expeditionary Force, located on the eastern seaboard, is the Commandant's Service Retained Marine Expeditionary Force. If you stay throughout the course of the week, you'll hear from 1 MEF and 3 MEF, which are focused at Indo-PACOM specifically. 2 MEF has the grand responsibility and grand privilege of covering down on everything else. That's all. We're focused at really a tri-COCOM area, EUCOM, CENTCOM, AFRICOM, but you will find us in SOUTHCOM, and you will find us in support of NORTHCOM any day of any week. So I would tell you that with allies and partners, specifically NATO, we also have great interest in the mission partner work that's being done, cross-domain solutions. They're watching what it is we're doing with regard to command and control, joint all-domain command and control, and multi-domain operations. These architectures are important. The capabilities that you help us deliver to the warfighter are important. And now we need to understand that speed is of the essence. So again, sense of urgency in the work that we do. I look forward to hearing your questions and having a conversation with you today. Thanks.
Thanks, General. Matt?
Yeah, good afternoon. And first, Ms. Rathbone and Barry, thanks for the opportunity to participate today and the invitation for the fleet to provide an operational perspective for this conference. I think it's extremely valuable. I'll share a little bit about myself, and so most folks in here know me, and I'm encouraged and motivated and humbled by all the faces I see in the audience of folks that I've worked for many years in many different roles, from being a resource sponsor to transitioning over to Fleet Cyber Command to be their deputy commander, ultimately to NAVI for man, train, and equip functions for this portfolio, with a small little detail to be the CIO of the United States Forest Service, and happy to talk about the expeditionary IT capabilities necessary for our first responders that you're seeing in use today, and where we could emulate some of the things that they do that are best of breed. And that ultimately, as the Executive Director and Chief of Staff for U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The binder you see here in front of me is not just a list of notes that I've collected over my time in those multiple roles. Because I knew I was participating in this event, similar to AFCEA East, I went out to update the data call that I did to support my AFCEA East discussion. That data call was a data call that we sent out to our fleet to get feedback from sailors on the ground, sailors at the deck plate from the most junior, feedback from our most recent fleet post-deployment briefs, getting feedback from carrier strike group commanders on the health of their C5I infrastructure and their ability to use those tools to execute their mission, and then direct feedback from the four-star commander on deficiencies that we have to address in order for us to be lethal in how we address our adversaries in the future. To address Barry's questions that he ended the last discussion with, and he started this one with, the answer to both of those questions is no, period. And those questions, to remind you, was, does the fleet have what it needs to fight and win in this portfolio? The answer is no. Do we have it when we need it, at the scale in which we need it today to fight and win? The answer is no. My book is a list of quotes, metrics, data points from sailors to 3- and 4-star admirals that will support my claim that the collective group today for those answers is no. So look forward to sharing their feedback, not mine, but their feedback on how we're delivering and making sure that we can rally this force at this conference to achieve yes to both of those questions, Barry. Thanks.
Outstanding. Thank you, Matt. All right, so we've got a few questions for the panel up here. We're going to go through and get their perspectives as we go through that. Hopefully that will spur on some of the question and answer at the end. So we'll get started from a fleet and fleet marine force perspective. What are your highest priorities when it comes to how ISV 2.0 and its extended execution supports your mission? Matt, why don't we start with you on that?
Sure. Thanks, Barry. So just a little show and tell. This book right here, I carry it with me everywhere I go. It's a small copy of the CNO's nav plan and her Project 33 targets. Everything that we're doing in the fleet and everything that we're doing across the Navy should be mapping back to this nav plan. It's extremely well done. And if when you read it, you do not see C5I information warfare embedded throughout this document, I ask you to read it again, because this portfolio of capability underpins everything in this book. Our ability to achieve the strategic outcomes and the combat effectiveness and lethality that we're hoping to do in this force is outlined in this book. It's underwritten by all the capabilities that you deliver. From a fleet forces perspective, we have 3 primary mission statements, and I hope everybody here knows them. Because that's why we're here, is to support the fleet and the sailors that are operating forward. Our 3 primary missions are to organize, man, train, and equip our forces, to force generate them, to flow forward, to fight and win, and ensure that they return home safely. That's mission number 1 from Fleet Forces, force generation to enable force employment by our combatant commanders. Our second one, as a direct responsibility from NAV North, or from NORTHCOM as NAV North, is to deter, detect, and defend against homeland and provide homeland defense for this nation in the maritime domain. So that is a direct responsibility as a component commander to NORTHCOM. And the third is also a component responsibility that we have to ensure that we can provide the maritime strategic deterrence capabilities necessary for our strategic deterrence, which underpins all of our warfighting O-plans. That strategic deterrence must hold, and the most reliable and sustainable capability in that portfolio is the maritime strategic deterrence. And that is the third mission inside of Fleet Forces Command. Are we able to execute all of those today? with the tools that we need? I think we can. We are excellent in force employment. We could be better in force generation. But in those descriptions of those missions, train and equip for C5I is an area where we must do better. We have to do better in terms of ensuring that the forces that go forward have common tools, that all of the sailors are trained and proficient with the tools that we deploy them with, because that's how they get home safely. So here we go. Quote number 1, from a sailor operating in your fleet, using the tools that you provide. Many of the networks that we are tasked to defend have end-of-life equipment that is no longer supported by the warfighter or the vendors that provide them. The average sailor is 22.5 years old. Conversely, the average age of the top 5 unclassified non-combat systems that they are asked to support in the fleet is 27 years old. So capabilities and tools that are currently operating on our gray holes are older than the sailors that we're asking to operate them. We have to do better. An updated quote from our fleet: while existing systems often excel in their individual functionalities, there is room for improvement to integrate across platforms to enhance the interoperability and data sharing across our different platforms. We have to do better to ensure that we fight as an integrated force, whether that's a composite strike group or that is with our joint providers and partners that the General articulated. And a metric for you, our C5I CAS reps from FY20 to FY24 have increased twofold over that period of time, which means our systems are becoming less reliable. The primary driver for the increase in CAS reps, as reported back by our Carrier Strike Group commander, is that the drivers were the lack of manning and the training and the lack of time to troubleshoot during the op tempos that we're asked to operate. So you can imagine a Carrier Strike Group commander or CEO of a gray hole operating in the Red Sea and trying to troubleshoot a C5I system while engaged in kinetic operations. The number of onboard tech assist across our platforms has skyrocketed. And I have metrics in here in terms of the hours that onboard tech assists and vendors spend on our platforms. Those hours increasing do not ensure the lethality of the fleet. We must do better. The other area that we have to think about is the .MLPF and ensuring that we are training our sailors to be the most effective users of the tools as possible, that they have the ability to troubleshoot, respond quickly, give the commander as much decision space as possible to ensure that they can make warfighting decisions at the speed of war and not rely on outdated systems. The ability to do that is critical. I'll pause there and defer to my colleagues.
Okay. General thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I would say some of the perspectives of your sailors with regard to the age of our systems, the understanding what the implications therefore might be inside of the system of systems. There's nothing like having a very young Marine or sailor look at you and be amazed that our architecture is comprised of aged components. So what does that mean? I would tell you that inside the MEF, inside the Marine Corps broadly speaking, we focus and look at the world through a lens, and I'm going to be very tactical here for a moment. The mindset has to be that everything we do is about warfighting. So when the systems of systems are old and aged, are we serious about our business of warfighting? That's a question. Very, very good question for a young Marine to ask a 3-star. Those are 3-star type of problems. So the mindset has to be focused on warfighting. Our mission inside of 2MEF, specifically, we generate combat-ready formations. We send Marines and sailors to Indo-PACOM. I told you we're focused on the Tri-COCOM area, but we send combat-ready formations to Indo-PACOM to become part of the stand-in forces. They must be trained, man-trained and equipped to go to war inside of, weeks, days, but go to war with 3MEF inside of Indo-PACOM. And then, of course, when we start talking about the members of the team, the third lens, we focus on the mindset, we understand our mission to generate combat-ready formations, and then, of course, the members of the team have to be trained and equipped. We don't have enough of the very low-density, high-demand, signals intelligence experts, information warfare experts, information environment and information operations officers, and enlisted Marines. We don't quite yet have them in the density that we need to have them. Inside the Marine Corps, of course, where we focus on sometimes the operational and tactical delivery of capabilities and quite often the pointy-ended capabilities, we are increasing the density of these low-density, high-demand MOSs. The training, back to .mil PF conversation, the training needs to advance. The technologies that we deliver in the schoolhouses, the live virtual constructive methodologies that we use to train and prepare for war need to evolve very, very quickly and more readily so that we can use them to prepare those combat-ready formations. And then, of course, the retention of those individuals inside of our formations becomes a very, very big focus for us time now. In terms of some of the things we're doing, right now we're investing heavily in commercial capabilities that provide resilient, low latency, and high-speed communications. Increasing the density of those small form factor capabilities is really important inside the Marine Corps. We are expeditionary, we're expected to operate in austere environments, and therefore low latency, resilient, those capabilities and those particular characteristics are very, very meaningful. Right now, we're shrinking from large satellite systems to small form factor systems that allow us to execute in a distributed format. That is where the Marine Corps is going right now. Distributed, highly mobile, meaning that we cannot be encumbered by large systems, large capabilities, large form factor types of systems that don't allow us to move at speed. We're also working to ensure that the zero trust technologies, such as software-defined networking, extend all the way to the tactical edge. For the Marine Corps, right now we're contemplating how much of the Marine Corps can go forward in operations. How much of the Marine Corps can be forward deployed off of an amphibious platform? Well, we're probably going to leave the large node in the rear, protected, and move and become more agile with smaller command and control nodes, forward, distributed, again, survivable in a contested spectrum inside of a contested environment. That is a huge change for how we've operated ever. And we're learning in stride, and we're learning with our allies and partners, and they're watching what we do. I'll pause there. Please.
Thank you, sir. I'll echo some of Matt's comments here, and I think, one, everything that we are doing within the Pacific Fleet and aligned with Indo-PACOM is actually aligned with the CNO's navigation plan for 2024, as Matt referenced. There is nothing that we do within the PAC Fleet AOR at the S2, S3, or S4 level that is not focused on the readiness and possibility of going to war with China in 2027. Whether it's in 2027 or 2035 or 2050, depending on which book on Xi that you're reading. It is our ability, our responsibility to make sure that our warfighters, our sailors, the Marines that we have under MAR-4PAC are ready to go to war. Second one is that long-term advantage, and that's making sure that the capabilities that we have on the field are there to sustain our warfighters in time of need. There's some mention of readiness. When I look, so 3 days a week, we look at the readiness of the entire Pacific Fleet, 100-plus ships, submarines, squadrons. We look at the A sub O, the ability to operate a platform at sea when needed. And that number is way too low for us to go to war, right? Part of that is the IT systems on those ships. As Matt referenced, they're older than a lot of the young sailors that are maintaining or sustaining them. But every day we look at a large number of those systems and know that they need to be replaced. They're end of life. There's actually no way to replace them because the hardware and the software on them are so old. I talked to a young 19, 20-year-old airman who had, I guess he was 20, because he had an AA degree in software. He'd been doing a lot of work in C++. I asked him what he was doing for his organization, and he was compiling COBOL and Pascal software. All right, I think that's older than me, but that just tells you that where some of the, as we look at some of these programs, where that modernization needs to go. I was at Stratcom when they took the operational 10-inch floppy, which I didn't even know we had 10-inch floppy drives, took it out of the Stratcom operating system, and they took it out and wheeled it down to the Stratcom Museum, where it went from operations on one day, and literally an hour later, it is now in the middle of the museum as a key capability. Those are the types of things that we need to look at when we modernize not only just the fleet, but across all of our combatant commands. Part of that problem is that program managers in the acquisition world are not incentivized to bring that technology in. Program managers are incentivized to meet the cost, schedule, and performance. But as Matt mentioned, we're today not only seeing more CAS reps across the fleet, but we're getting delivery of products with CAS reps on them. So that after a 1 year or a 6-month install, we get the platform turned over to the fleet. I'm now looking at trying to make sure that the fleet can sustain and maintain a system and burn off the 30-plus CAS reps to make it operational. And to us, at the fleet level, that's unacceptable. So what we're doing, we have Bob Stevenson. Actually, not that much anymore, because now Bob's moved to Indo-PACOM. But Bob was that pressurization for us to make sure that things could happen at the fleet speed, and making sure that we brought in new capabilities and technologies. Now, when I was the chief engineer, I honestly had a problem with Bob, because Bob would kill me every night trying to look at something and say, Bob, you got to take that off the ship. We can't do that. Now, as the deputy commander out at PAC Fleet, I would ask Bob, what else can you put on that ship so that we can pull this, pull data back, look at how the systems are operating. We're running out of onboard tech assists and ICAs to be able to do that. We don't want to put civilians out in the middle of the South China Sea in order to fix a system while they're deployed. So those are some of the challenges that then we'll get into later. We have to figure out how to continuously innovate and bring the systems that we have in private industry and the commercial side into DoD. And whether that's leveraging the cloud, it's timely adoption of new technologies, we need to figure out within the acquisition lifecycle how to do that more rapidly at speed and deliver capability to our sailors as they move forward and make that fight. And whether that again is in 27 or 30 or whenever, that our bosses decide, then we have to be ready to use that. And so part of that also goes to the training. We need to have systems not in 27. So if we want to listen to the Davidson window, I actually need that equipment delivered in 25, because I need to take an 18-year-old sailor, put them through an A school, a C school. I need to get them time on the system so that they actually understand how to operate it and maintain it. Because in conflict, we will not be able to tell that 20-year-old how to fix the system. So we need time on those systems. We need the schools to ramp up. We need all of that done in a way that we can make sure that that young man or woman is ready to go and can run those systems. And that comes down to the most important part for us, is the ability to do command and control in a denied environment. We may not own the architecture and the network. We may use someone else's network, but we have to be able to figure out the information support superiority piece to that, and that is the critical driver for us. So what are those things, and how are we going to fight from the mock, another concept within Project 33 that Admiral Franchetti has put out, right? One of her major 7 lines. We have to figure those things out, not in 27 and not in 30, but today. So I'll hold the rest of my comments till later. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, that's a great start to talk about it. We covered a lot of different things in that first line of questioning, but I'll lead in for the second question of getting back to what Matt and Eric referred to there and support or referencing to the NAV plan, Project 33, the Commandant's Force Design. How do you see ISV 2.0, the framework that we put out there, supporting those two key strategic documents? And with that, I'll start with General Worf.
So ISV 2.0 and the Commandant's planning guidance and force design more broadly, I would tell you that they're very well nested. Admiral Franchetti and General Smith, of course, they speak all the time. But as it pertains to Marine Corps capabilities and force design, we talked about the .mil PF implications of delivering new technologies and capabilities. We've talked a little bit about the challenges of command and control from a warfighting function standpoint, command and control, fires, C5, ISRT, logistics. For the Marine Corps, we are taking very specific actions to make sure that not only are we nested and aligned with where the CNO is going with ISV 2.0, but we have done things like establish the Fleet Marine Force Tactical Grid. The Tactical Grid is an edge capability which allows access to warfighters, to mission-critical applications and services. This gets to the key point of making sure that Marines who are forward deployed, operating at the edge of the empire in austere environments, have a mechanism to be connected to the grid, a system of systems and an architecture that is robust, agile, and provides connectivity. It is no longer the realm of very simple data communications pathways. So again, the tactical grid is something that responds to the tactical edge. Inside of ISV 2.0, we talk about building once and using often. These robust and agile architectures allows our logistics nodes, our logistics combat elements, to explore cloud adoption. And of course, that allows for them to ensure data operability. That data that they can obtain inside of a theater or inside of a Navy logistics construct will ensure that they can deliver logistics capabilities wherever they are on the globe. The Information Command Center being pursued by our MAGTF intelligence centers and our MAGTF intelligence groups, the MIGs. They are ensuring that they are also postured for global crisis response. They're using Maven Smart System and data aggregation, data distillation to ensure that we can operate as a Marine Corps with our naval counterparts, fight from the MOC, making sure that we can all operate from a single pane of glass. We're using these systems in concert, not just inside the naval formations, but also with our joint counterparts. The Army is pursuing Maven Smart System and capabilities like Maven through Palantir in INDOPACOM, in CENTCOM, in EUCOM, using those like systems to ensure that we can operate at speed. Command and control, fires, constructs, opening and closing kill chains at speed with allies and partners. We are pursuing these capabilities time now, today. Finally, we're ensuring that these constructs are defendable and survivable. So we're working very, very closely, again, via Marine Corps Systems Command with the Navy and CIO. We're making sure that we can defend these systems. And not the systems, but the data. We're moving to, again, constructs that ensure that we can protect the data, move the data at speed, speed of relevance inside of these constructs in austere environments. I will continue to focus on the Marine Corps expeditionary constructs because when we leave an amphibious platform and go ashore, and when we operate in a distributed format, the small form factor, the survivability in spectrum in a contested environment, that is where we are focused right now. And you've talked about the challenge of some of your rates and some of your MOSs. We need more of those individuals to go in more places in these distributed formats now. And that is a real challenge for the Marine Corps. More technology, more humans that can apply the technology within a contested environment against an adversary who is going to be very, very capable. That's against the pacing threat, and certainly inside of the theaters that we are focused on inside of 2MEF, whether it be EUCOM, CENTCOM, or AFRICOM. We know that the adversary we might face in those environments will be very, very capable of contesting the spectrum, contesting the environment, and causing us to be more distinct about requirements and capabilities that we need today in 2025, and not be distracted by long time horizons and conversations that talk about 2030, 2035, which is why the Commandant has removed a date from force design. Force design means pursuing capabilities that are relevant today for the near term, and of course pursuing technologies that will enable us to maintain our asymmetric advantage in the mid to long term as well. And so that distinctly is how the Commandant has directed his commanders to identify what the requirements are and then ensure that we are trained and equipped and prepared to use those capabilities in delivering combat power ashore and forward in the years to come.
All right, thanks. Eric?
Yeah, thanks. Sir, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll hit a couple of things and certainly how CNO's NAV plan and ISV 2.0 are tied together. Primarily focused on, the last couple of years, and they really tie together as the focused efforts and the resources that we've worked with N2, N6, and N9 through the CIO's office, really to fund these programs. And so when we look at optimize, secure, and decide, we look at some of the programs that we've rolled out over the last year, maybe 2 years. And I'll hit a couple of them and then take that to also where that's enabling us. One was cyber threat modeling and analysis tools, right? So on the optimized side, a number of vendors out there, and I know this morning we talked about, well, we have a lot of pilot programs, and maybe we need to get more concerted effort through and bring one solution together. Today, though, we're reaching out to across industry to bring various capabilities here. But our cyber threat modeling tools allowed us to really allow the sailor or the person in the at the platform, in the MOC, in the NOC, that real-time automated network and threat mapping capability. Provides our sailors the ability to look at the blue kill chains, provide increased situational awareness. But it's the optimization part that's most important. It's telling them what they need to focus on, where they need to do their work, because not all threats are the same. And so looking at some cyber threat modeling tools over the last year and a half have been critical for us, and those are some of the things that have been enabled through ISV 2.0. Another key capability for us was SABRE. So the ability for situational awareness, boundary defense, the ability to look at our control systems and the information platforms. Hopefully down the road we'll be looking at combat systems, navigation systems, weapon systems, how we bring all of those together. But it's important to keep and build a defense layer in between so that should the adversary actually get into our platforms, we limit their ability to move horizontally across other ships' platforms. A critical capability for us, because if they do get inside and they have phenomenal cyber capabilities, we need to be able to defend and protect our ships. That has also driven us to how we have to communicate. So we deploy in a disconnected environment. We provide commander's intent to deploying strike groups or MEFs or MUs, and then expect them to carry out commander's intent. Our ability to do C2 for us is through non-geostationary platforms. So getting, I'll say, out of some of the key core IT capabilities, it's how we move data, right? Data is our lifeblood. You could say that the Navy is just a large IT company. It is extremely important for us, and so looking at all the pipes that we need to move data, whether it's free space optics or it's PLEO, the time it takes to move data from terrestrial to a low Earth orbit back down to a fighting force is critical for us. And so that PLEO architecture or other architectures that whether SDA, NRO, or the Navy are developing are significantly important. And that's where we leverage NAVWAR and where Admiral O'Connor is working on the Overmatch team to provide those capabilities. At the back end, if I get all this data and I can't really do anything unless I have great BMAs, right? So battle management aids. Those tools and those applications that can now be modernized and work on all of our systems are extremely important to us. This past year, if you've been out to PAC Fleet, we have actually stood up an operations center that combines legacy types of targeting in the MIOC and brought in what we now call the OMIOC, which then leverages multiple architectures, but it brings also all of the interagency capabilities to the fight and allows us to pull all this data together. And so for us, the ability to leverage organizations, whether it's in the CIO or at CDAO level, having access to capabilities that we can work with Advana and Jupiter, doing big data analytics, and applying all of these new, well, we say new, right? The Navy's just learned that there's a thing called LLM. It's been out there for a long time, right? And we're just now trying to figure out how we leverage all that in the data world. But our ability to use data analytics is going to drive our ability to do fires, not the type of fires that we've grown accustomed to over the last 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, or the fires that we're looking at in the Southcom AOR, or even in Europe. All right. When we look at the size of the Indo-PACOM AOR, we need the ability to do things at speed. You rotate the size of the United States, and that is just the first and second island chain in the Pacific. And we'll have sailors, Marines, Army. Today we function as a joint task force in the Pacific under Admiral Kaler. That ability to hand off dynamic targeting, whether it's to a Marine on a small island doing anti-surface warfare, or to a fast-moving Air Force jet that now needs a new target, those are all going to be driven by the adversary, and our ability to do that within the MOC is critical for us. So those are all things, as we tie them back tightly to ISV 2.0, it's that ability to optimize the decision process, making sure the data that we're sending in a fires process is the data that we need and the data that the warfighter needs. And then it's that ability to decide faster than the adversary. So as long as we can do that, then we win. But that's the importance of tying the NAV plan, ISV 2.0, and then from a fleet perspective, that's our warfighting critical needs. So thanks.
All right, Matt?
So just to refresh the question again, right? So if I get it right, Barry, so it's how does ISV 2.0 support the CNO's NAV plan and the Commandant's Force Design, correct?
Correct, yes.
I would offer that ISV 2.0 does not support the NAV plan or force design. Why do I say that? Because I think the term support is too weak. ISV 2.0 sets the foundation for our ability to achieve the NAV plan or force design. It doesn't support it. Without it, we can't get there. And so we need to think about it differently in terms of how we talk about it. Supporting is not the right connection word to our ability to execute and fight and win. Without this portfolio of work, for which I'm sure everybody in this room contributes to, the sailors and the Marines that we ask to go forward will not be successful and their safety's at risk. So we need to think about it more strongly than just supporting. So who's read NAV plan? Who's read the NAV plan in the room? Everybody's familiar with the 7 Project 33 outcomes that the CNO's wanting to achieve and the Marine Corps' force design concept. So let me tie it directly to it on how those two things tie together. I'll talk to you a little bit about the NAV plan and the Project 33 goals, and then I'll talk to you about the enabling capabilities within the NIF, which is the NAV plan implementation framework, and how those two things overlay and not just support, but set the foundation to achieve Project 33. Project 33, number one, is to ready our platforms. It's the ability to achieve and sustain 80% combat surge-ready ships, aircrafts, and submarines. If that is not optimizing the force to ensure that we can achieve 80% combat surge-ready with those capabilities, I'm not sure what is. The definition for combat surge-ready is that units that can be made ready for specified missions within acceptable levels of risk for combat employment. That means that the tools that they have, the capabilities, whether they're combat systems or communication systems, are able to operate by the sailors that use them, and they're able to troubleshoot them. That is 80% combat surge ready. That is all about optimize. Operationally, integrate robotic and autonomous systems. Also a Project 33 outcome. What is that? It is that we can move proven systems into the hands of warfighters at speed and pace. It's not just about robotic systems, it's all capabilities that we have to get into the fleet. What is that? The ability to optimize and decide. We don't want robotics for robotics' sakes. We want the ability to increase the sensor portfolio to be able to collect information and get it back to the decision makers at speed to ensure that they could out-decision at pace against our adversary. That is all about decision, decide, speed. Fight from the mock. That is all about optimize, secure, and decide. Without those three elements being healthy and deployed across the fleet, our mocks have risk of being ineffective or being vulnerable to cyber adversaries. Those three elements of ISV 2.0 set the foundation to ensure confidence in our ability to execute and fight from the mock. Invest in warfighter competency, also a Project 33 goal. Our ability to improve live virtual constructive training, the ability to ensure that we can train our forces regardless of where they are, whether they're in a brick and mortar schoolhouse or they're operating forward, and we need to ensure that they have the operational proficiency to be effective. That is all about optimize, secure, and decide, enabling our sailors to do what they have to do in the op tempos that they operate within. So in the nav plan implementation framework, there's 4 key enabling functions inside of that. And I don't have to state them because I saw everybody's hand raised when I asked if you had seen them, but I'll just remind you. So live virtual constructive, that is how we train. That is how we train. Our ability to train in a space that is safe, that our adversaries cannot monitor our movements on, so we always have operational superiority against the threat and the folks that we're going to compete with. Live virtual constructive provides you the opportunity to train in those environments and at scale and at speed. The Navy operational architecture, that is how we communicate. That is how we move information to optimize, secure, and create decision space for our fleet commanders. Artificial intelligence, what is that? It's a great buzzword that we'll talk about in this conference because everybody wants to talk about AI. You'll probably hear it 10,000 times today. What is it for the fleet? It's how we outthink. If you are not using artificial intelligence to provide the fleet commanders the ability to outthink their adversary at speed, then I don't need it. It's about decision speed, and AI can enable that for the fleet commanders. Robotic and autonomous systems. Again, why do I want robotic systems? Because they're cool and they can deliver my Amazon package? No, because they give us the ability to scale the fleet, to create a sensor network, to improve lethality, to delay an adversary's ability to attack, and ultimately increase our decision advantage in conflict. So when you're here these next couple days and you're talking about robotics and artificial intelligence, don't do it in context of cool academics. Do it in context of how you provide fleet commanders the ability to decide and how you ensure you out-advantage our adversaries in the WES. If you're not putting those tools in the WES, I don't need them to deliver my Amazon package. And the last is really about our ability to ensure that we are ready to surge our force. Without your tools operating, without your tools being sustained by the user, not by somebody who flies aboard, we are not combat surge ready. I think that's all I got for that one, Barry.
Okay, thanks, Matt. That's all good. And key for us all to be thinking about. So we've talked on the panel already about a number of challenges that we face in realizing our vision. So I'm gonna change it up here a little bit and just say, how do you see the acquisition community, warfare centers, industry, and essentially everybody in this room as helping you to address and hopefully overcome those challenges and realize the vision that we've laid out both in the strategic documents, Project 33, and the Commandant's Planning Guidance that we've talked about, but as ISV 2.0 empowers those 2 documents. So we'll start with you, Eric.
All right. So first of all, those that just have gone to SNA and heard Admiral Franchetti speak, all right, she talked about the challenges that we have, and they're real. She acknowledged the fact that we have some constraints, not only with industry, but our own internal bureaucratic process and the budget constraints. She said, we also can't take our foot off the gas, right? It is important that we continue to run at speed. And so that is in her NAV plan and is one of our great challenges. We don't need a new plan. We don't need new acquisition processes or a new FAR, new anything to get us there. What we need to do is move faster with the plans we have in order to deliver the readiness that Matt mentions to be able to fight tonight. We achieved that through Project 33. Fighting from the mock is certainly one of those key places for us. As I mentioned, our ability to execute inside the mock, the ability to do fires and dynamic targeting against our adversaries is critical to that. And Barry, you asked, what can industry do, or what can the folks in this room? Because we also have warfare centers and government folks in here. So we need to bring all of this together into systems that can work and be fully integrated, not just across the Navy, not just across our service components, but as a JTF commander and what we're doing in the Pacific, or actually in any AOR. We're also working closely with allies and partners. And we have to have the ability to move that data seamlessly. Today, if you go to the 5th Fleet mock in Bahrain, or if you come out to Hawaii, you'll see a room that's separated with those that are in the know and those that are in the no foreign area. We need to be able to get to yes foreign, and we need to be able to get there rapidly. And so one of the things that we need to do is, as we develop capabilities, look at it from a mindset that says, how do we share this? The U.S. is an unbelievable fighting force. We are even stronger when we tie our allies and partners together. We talk about a 300-ship Navy. We're much larger than a 300-ship Navy when we bring in our allies and partners. And whether it's AUKUS and AUKUS 2.0 and the various capabilities, all of that in the Pacific, when we bring in Japan, Korea, and do trilateral, multilateral events, whether it's Vietnam, the Philippines, all of that has to be a place where we can share our information and our data, because that is what brings them to the fight. And so I would ask that you all think about how we can do that. The other piece that I would bring is people and the processes. We talked about trying to modernize and bring capability to the fleet, but we can't forget about the most important thing in that loop, and that is the people. Right? Again, when I look back at a young 18-year-old man or woman sitting there trying to figure out how a system works, designed by brilliant people, whether in the warfare centers and industry, many with PhDs and think like an engineer, how do I get a young man or woman to think about how to operate and maintain that system? And so I ask that you also think about, as you develop a capability, it's not just an IEDM or a manual that has to go out to the fleet. It's about, how do you think a young man or woman is going to be able to operate that system in the heat of battle, in conflict, right? We can do things today off the coast, very easy. But when things change is when it's in 18-foot seas, hurricane level winds, and an adversary that outnumbers us 3-1. That's what we have to think about every day. Our ships are out there 3, sometimes 5-1 when we're in the South China Sea. How is a young sailor going to operate their system? So I ask you to think about that. The pace of threat versus and modernization. Our adversaries are moving faster than we are. We need to figure out how to modernize at speed. The adversary certainly has a say in what we're going to deploy, and so I think we also need to figure out, not just in the technology side, but the approval side. How do we shape Fleet Cyber and the NAO and other organizations that control what we deploy on ships and in platforms to make that approval process faster? If you can help to build capabilities inside an approved environment, whether it's and every vendor has a different name for it. So whether it's a garage or the overmatch cloud, I need you to think of how we can accelerate that that capability because your system that you're building, the capability, has already been approved. So IWS has their program, Navor has theirs, Navair has a different development program, all shaped at getting software applications out there. So again, think about where those can, how you build those out instead of building it in a separate environment and then bringing it in later. Start from the beginning. Do that systems engineering up front and deliver a product. Those, to me, are the things that people can do to help us out, but thanks.
Great, thanks, sir. Matt?
Sure. Where do I start, I guess? I guess I'll start with a quote from Admiral Cottle, United States Fleet Forces commander, and it ties to Ready Relevant Learning. And if you're not familiar with that program, I ask that you become familiar with it. And I believe Dave Kemp's in the room, if I can see your hand somewhere over here. Quite possibly the best PM in the United States Navy is taking something so complex and it rolled it out to the fleet at a pace that I think we all wish to be able to achieve. But here's his quote regarding RL. Ready Relevant Learning is how we will forge an elite warfighting force by maturing sailors over a career development continuum that can assess, innovate, and execute both technically and tactically. We will win with sailors who can master and engage their weapon systems with speed, effect, and absolute lethality across the full spectrum of modern warfare. That's not just a training quote. That is about how we will fight and win into the future. And I wanted to share that quote with you from Admiral Cottle because I think it's relevant to everything that we're discussing here today. So how can you help? Inside of RL, one of the steps in that process is to evaluate the task level requirements for the programs of record that are currently operational in the fleet today. So what are the individual task level training requirements for those systems? When we did that evaluation in RL, I'm going to give you some numbers here just to prove my point and not to speak in theory. We identified 10,861 task level requirements for ITs in the fleet operating those systems. Of those 10,000, we identified 4,317 gaps in the training, meaning that we were not training at the task level almost 40% of the tasks to our sailors that they were responsible to execute. That's a failure. It's a failure in how we're conducting our ILS packages. It's a failure in how we're delivering capability. It's a failure in how we're developing curriculum. And it's a failure in how we're administering training for the fleet. And it breaks down in many places. But let's improve training. And let's ensure that the training material and the curriculum that we're providing for sailors who are using tools in the fleet today is full and healthy. And Dave's working to get us there, and I appreciate that. Another one, cyber hygiene. We have been talking about cyber hygiene for a decade plus. And I'm almost to the point where I'm almost offended that we are asking our sailors to be more cyber hygiene in what they do every day. Let me give you a metric. On average, for the cyber inspections conducted in the fleet, the programs of record have a score of around 55%, 15% below a passing score. Programs of record delivered by a professional acquisition force and delivered to the fleet with technical proficiency and expertise fail 15% of the time. The score associated and tied to the sailors who are operating those systems, the cyber hygiene metric for our sailors, is passing. Yet we have a narrative about improving the cyber hygiene in the fleet. Is that narrative still accurate? Or are sailors asking for better? I believe they're asking for better, so let's not blame them for our cyber posture. Let's understand where we're needing to do better. I'm not going to leave you with all negative. I'll give you with positives too. So what we were able to demonstrate to support our forces operating and forward in the theater today has been absolutely exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. Our ability to ensure that the combat systems are updated at speed and at time of relevance to ensure that they could operate in a kinetic environment to be effective to ensure the safety of those forces, and our ability to respond to unmanned vehicles that we are not familiar with to ensure that the combat systems can react at time has been absolutely exceptional. And that's from this team. And so the fleet thanks you for doing that and protecting our sailors. Our ability to provide communication services that relieve the pressures on our combat systems and C5I infrastructure to ensure that we have, of the bandwidth that we do have, that we can prioritize it to meet operational mission, has been absolutely exceptional and is demonstrated across the fleet today. We are gaining so much bandwidth and utilization out of the tools that you're providing because we're looking at how to deliver things differently, that we are seeing increases in terms of those systems being able to operate. That is combat systems to log systems and maintenance systems and just moving parts into the theater. How do we do that? Things like Sting and the ability to leverage those types of Wi-Fi type services to relieve the pressures on our combat systems has been absolutely exceptional. Exceptional. Quotes from the fleet. Wi-Fi made everything and everyone happier. My job is so much smoother. The internet just works. I can't believe they pulled this off, was a quote. Single-handedly, this is from a carrier CO. Single-handedly, the biggest quality of life contribution to the fleet in my entire career. It avoids leaving sailors at home because they have connectivity. The flank speed feedback from our sailors, IW sailors, operating across the shore, and the tools that are provided from flank speed have been an absolute game changer. And our ability to roll that out, I know challenging, but it has been exceptional. I look forward to getting those capabilities to the fleet forward. And I know that we're doing that. And underneath Ms. Rathbun's leadership, and understanding that there is no seam in terms of the service that the sailor ashore should get from the sailor afloat, they all should expect the same capabilities. And under her leadership and through ISV 2.0, that is where we're getting. So strategically, the vision and the path we're on is exceptional. So I just want to thank you for that. I know some of my comments were abrupt, but it's the truth. But I also believe that where we're going is the right answer, so thank you for that.
Thanks, General.
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate your comments and the comments that come from the deck plate levels. They can be reflected in the Marine Corps as well. And I've spent a lot of time talking about where the Marines will be positioned in their austere operating environment. But I'll finish here. In terms of challenges, the Commandant has asked his Marines to balance crisis response, and the Marine Corps' task to be that force in readiness, to be forward deployed, to be responsive today, tomorrow. That's our focus. At the same time, we continue with modernization. It's a real challenge for the Marine Corps that has focused a lot of its time and energy on tactical and operational advantages in a fight today, tomorrow. But the Commandant has really tipped the apple cart, so to speak, in order to get after modernization. He generated some headlines as we divested of capabilities that are about warfighting today, tomorrow, so that he could invest more distinctly in modernization efforts. And so, that being said, I would tell you that our ties with the naval enterprise, our requirement to better connect U.S. Marine Corps tactical sensors, and those sensors are both the humans and the technologies that we use to sense and make sense of the environment, connecting them and that system of systems to the Navy's resilient command and control and virtual secure enclave. Those are very distinct efforts. That's language that, trust me, as an infantry Marine, you have to learn and understand. The adaptations being made right now with regard to acquisitions, programmatics, and the types of platforms that we are causing the enterprise to pursue, that's a real change for the Marine Corps right now. Inside of a flat budget that has always been focused on operational requirements, more and more of that requirement has to go to modernization efforts within the naval force to ensure that as we deliver capabilities that are expeditionary in nature, the Marine Corps and the Navy have no space between the two. As we go out and operate and we support the fleets, again, maybe from amphibious platforms as we go forward and seize key maritime terrain, or from shore into the maritime domain, we are going to be operating within the MOC construct. We're going to be fighting from a MOC. It's going to be a blue-green type of configuration, whether it be task units, task groups, task forces. will be together as we pursue this effort. Some of the challenges. What can you do? Industry solutions. We're looking for useful, practical, right size in terms of form factor, capabilities that can be carried forward into battle. Meaning that, again, big pipes, big infrastructure, big capabilities that are in large form factors are not all that useful for the Marine Corps. We need it to be shrunk, downsized, so that it becomes expeditionary, truly expeditionary in terms of its application. I would tell you that with the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory and with regard to our family of integrated targeting cells, again, any sensor, any shooter, working with our allies and partners and making sure that we have the cross-domain solutions that allow us to move information at the speed of relevance. Not only integrated within our blue-green constructs, but also the joint construct and the coalition construct. We need those solutions today, not tomorrow. Those are requirements. As we operate, as NATO expands, and we bring on new partners, I would tell you that in Scandinavia, in the Baltics, they are very, very much interested in making sure those cross-domain solutions become real today. Again, no foreign is not the language we should use, and we overclassify by our very nature in order to protect information, but the data and the information needs to be appropriately moved at speed across our networks and our constructs. I would tell you finally, in terms of the electromagnetic spectrum, we know that we'll operate in environments that will be contested, but spectrum sharing is a requirement, and making sure that we have the authorities and the permissions, the governance that is proactive and approves and authorizes and permits training as we fight, and then facilitates operating in a shared spectrum, hiding within that spectrum, and gaining advantage in spectrum. Those are all areas that we can do more today in order to deliver those capabilities. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, General. Appreciate it. All right. I think we heard some outstanding insights this afternoon. We have time for just a couple of questions. And I see Sink, you're at the mic. Over to you.
Hi, sir. Sink Harris, a retired Gator sailor, serving at Mantech. We've talked about a lot of different things today, but I've only heard the word autonomy used once. So could you give us an update on what is the state of autonomy in the fleet? Where is it going? What do you need us in industry to do or provide more to help develop more autonomous systems so that our sailors, our Marines, our civilians, everybody who's part of the warfighting team can fight more efficiently and effectively in the future?
Sink, great question. Thanks. So from autonomy from the fleet, I guess we probably are looking to talk more about that in the next couple of days, but it's great to talk about it today. We are in the middle of all of this with Replicator and what DepSecDef Hicks has enabled us to do across the joint force. A lot of the capabilities under Replicator 1 and 2 are all coming to the Pacific Fleet. We at PAC Fleet have the responsibility, we are accountable for integration of all of that capability. Whether it's an Air Force platform, an Army platform, something that SOCOM and through SOCPAC is developing. The things that we need, one is the ability to do command and control. That C2 capability to put manned and unmanned in the same theater. The ability for the submarine CO to know that they are in a space that is safe to operate, knowing that there are unmanned systems in the same piece of water. That's critical. That's part of the C2 structure. 2 is the bandwidth capability. How do we move data off of unmanned systems built at scale, right? So under Replicator, the ability to deploy hundreds or thousands of unmanned sensors across the environment is a lot of data. I need the ability, the infrastructure to be able to analyze all of that data, pull it together, aggregate, which also means, and we talked about this morning, I think, was how do you, that data just doesn't show up ready to go, right? We need to make sure that that data has been groomed, has been put in the right format so that all of our systems can get access to it. Those are probably the three biggest things from an autonomous standpoint that we're looking for. The last part is with inside the mock and the ability to do fires. Autonomy also drives that ability to make decisions faster. We need the autonomy, and part of that is whether you want to say it's AI or it's machine learning or it's large language models. That's also part of the autonomous capability. But that ability for a commander to make decisions faster, he or she at the point of the fight has to be able to take all of that data in and make a decision. And so they don't need to know where the data is coming from, but they need to understand what that data represents. And so we also need folks that are building capabilities as we push out autonomous, the answers in a format that we're ready to digest, right? I've seen a lot of things come out where the product was fantastic. The LLM was unmatched, but they represented it to an OS on a ship. That's not a ship. It's it came out in a different format, right? We have NTDS documents, right? How do we make that smart for the sailor? And I think industry needs to understand what we're also looking for. That kind of hits from beginning to end, but that's, to me, from a pack fleet perspective, that's what we're looking for, autonomy. And then lastly, why not send an autonomous system in when I don't need to send a sailor or an airman in? Why put a pilot in harm's way when I can put an unmanned system there or a ship driver? If I can put a USV out there in the middle of a conflict and let our DDGs and our carriers, our strategic assets, be further back, I'm now saving sailors. And so put unmanned systems where we don't need manned people, manned platforms.
Anything to add from the rest of the panel?
I would tell you that inside the Marine Corps right now, there's a lot of application for unmanned. Obviously, if it's about, not exposing Marines and sailors to harm's way, where we can send an unmanned system, whether that be to sense, whether that be to provide logistics in a distributed environment, there's a lot of application for unmanned, and that's air, and that is surface and subsurface exploration right now. It's experimental in terms of where these autonomous systems might fit inside our construct. But right now, we are pursuing those. And McWill, specifically inside the Marine Corps, has a number of efforts underway, specifically in the logistics realm. I think that is where we see immediate application or near-term application. And, of course, unmanned, wingman, things of that nature. Those are all efforts that are out there in the open space. We're pursuing where autonomy actually fits. But back to conditioning the data, delivering the data, trusting the data, so that you can act upon it or not be threatened by an unmanned system. That is always going to be part of the discussion. I'll stop there.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I'll just comment that I'd make, I won't talk to the warfighting capabilities, as my colleagues, I think, articulated that extremely well. What I'm excited about, I think, in this space, ultimately, is historically we've had a big challenge, I think, in the Department of Navy, moving from an urgent operational need to a warfare center who takes that and interfaces with industry to determine what capabilities exist and how can I use them, transitioning that to the acquisition enterprise, to the PEO construct, to try to make that more maritime, and then our ability to get it from the PEO into the fleet at scale, right? And so in that whole kill chain, if you will, industry plays, government plays, multiple different entities play, but there has been a rally around things like the Disruptive Capabilities Office on the OPNAV staff, programmatic decisions that are reflective inside of their strategic guidance on trying to move and accelerate that process. So the process from UON to Warfare Center development in partnership with industry, getting that to something that can be acquired through the PEO construct and then ultimately scaled to the fleet at speed. Everybody in the room has an equity stake in that discussion, so anything that we can do to accelerate that cycle, I think is a good thing. But Sir Admiral, to your question, I think what we're seeing is that we are seeing that there is a lot of effort to make programmatic adjustments, and then also looking at everything we can do to accelerate that cycle. And current operations has forced us to do that. And we're leveraging some of those use cases. I'm sure will be talked out later this week.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we got time for one more question.
Reese Morgan with Leidos. The word I've heard most this morning is ready and readiness. Today, we have CAS reps and the 3M system that feed up into DERS, so we have some sense of warfighting readiness for our platforms. With ISV 2.0, we're moving fast. We're shifting from network-centric into data-centric. Do we need some new, more dynamic measure of readiness for warfighting for ISV 2.0?
I would offer, I don't think so, because readiness for me is I just need it to work when it's supposed to work and make sure that I can sustain the capabilities to deliver to the fleet. So in terms of readiness perspective, I just need improved readiness, and how we do that with adding some more sophisticated capabilities to it, that's fantastic. But for readiness for me, and I know the readiness calculation is much more complex for this, I just need it ready. I need it working. I need less tech assists. I need less CAS reps. I need commonality across our platforms. I don't need multiple versions of existing programs of record that are all unique, operating on different platforms. I need better configuration control. I need better training to the sailors to ensure that they can operate what they have. Do I need more readiness metrics? No, I just need it to work.
I would offer inside the Marine Corps slightly different take. Certainly as it pertains to ground formations, forces that would go ashore. How do you measure readiness in that realm? How many repetitions does a human need with his weapon system or with her weapon system in order to be as efficient and to be truly integrated into our system of systems? That measure of human performance and the application of their tools, I think empirically plays out aboard ship. You do a great job in your entire construct of how you evaluate performance, identify individuals who are ready to be promoted inside the naval construct. Much more challenging on the ground side as it pertains to large formations going ashore and applying warfighting capabilities, on the ground. There's a place for AI and machine learning and, quite frankly, technology to measure, but that pertains to live virtual constructive. How do you measure? How do you know that you've shot and hit what you're supposed to shoot at? How do you know that you've appropriately leveraged the system of systems to make sense, call for fire, open and close a kill chain using all of the different resources and the right weaponeering that is to the advantage of our friendly force and doesn't disadvantage or harm other friendlies that might be in the area. So what's most efficient, what's most optimal inside of our many, many tools that we can bring to bear? I would tell you that how we measure readiness in DERS using and leveraging technology, probably different than what you were thinking, but I can see great use because a lot of times it comes down to a human to evaluate our humans and to determine where they're ready and how much they're ready. We have the training and readiness manuals, but there's a lot of human flexibility inside of those documents, I would tell you.
Reese, great to see you. It's been a few years.
Yes, sir.
So hit a couple of different. So one, DERS is looking at that ability, the readiness of the sailor itself, right? And it's based on education and experience and how we build that sailor or Marine up, right? And that's what's measured largely in DERS. And so it's driving that. The data is all there. How we leverage DERS to reflect readiness is one piece. I think the other piece of readiness, and I'll take it from an aviation perspective, we drive the air wing to a certain level of readiness. We take them to Fallon and do air wing Fallon. We take them to the highest level of readiness possible. All right, we do things both in a live virtual constructive and we do things on the range. And then we take them through Comp2X, and we make sure that we certify. And out here on the West Coast, we take 3rd Fleet and we say, are they ready to deploy and go into conflict? And then it's that expanse. We make sure that they're blue water certified. We take Marines and sailors and move them out into the west of the international date line. we still have a challenge there to maintain that readiness at the highest level, because we can't always train west, as we go west, and what can we do out there? So part of that, and I think to drive that readiness across the fleet, is to create capabilities that allow our deployed sailors and Marines the ability to train against folks that are here in CONUS, again, through that live virtual constructive capability, ingesting red adversary, so that our aviators sitting in the carrier can actually sit in the tub while they're not flying in the cockpit, running through various training capabilities against folks that are still flying here in Fallon or on the East Coast, bringing all of that together. So we have a huge, we need to rely on LVC to drive that readiness. And I'm not that's different than DERS, but it's still, an important capability for us.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, and been just up here moderating for the most part, but you threw chum in the water, so I'm going to grab it. All great comments across here, but from the perspective that we're looking at on the ISV 2.0, we measure things in DERS because for those things we know what ready looks like. And I think to your point, we have to take a very hard look about what ready looks like for the capability sets that we're talking here, because we train our pilots to fly at the highest level because we know what that highest level is. We know what blue water operations look like. Now we're overlaying something that's changing constantly on top of that. We have to understand upfront what's the concept of operations. What does ready look like? What does a sailor need to be able to do so we can train to it, so we can understand whether they have the skills necessary to do it. So my answer to that is we don't have to change our constructs. We have to know what to measure, and we need to be measuring against the outcomes we're looking for, so we need to know what those outcomes are. So we have to do a better job of defining what that outcome is, what that ready state is. To Matt's point, it just has to work. That sailor shouldn't have to think twice about what they need to be able to do. They got to know right then. So take from there and back it up. What do we have to do to put them in that state? And that's how we measure readiness, so, at least in my opinion. All right, well, thank you very much to the panel. Really appreciate your insights today, and thanks you all for coming.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 2. Check 1 2. Check 1